Not even 5 minutes walk, you think she'd be safe?
We're not giving up on you till we find you.
For a young girl to be kidnapped off the street when there were plenty of witnesses around was incredibly shocking.
Her name is Gordana Kotevski.
There's been this guy who has been hanging around over the recent kind of weeks and months. She calls him the Spook.
At this stage, we are treating it as an abduction, yes.
There was a struggle. She was pulled into the car and never seen again.
I think it changed Newcastle the day she disappeared.
And in fact,
A killer is still at large.
their cases may be the work of a serial killer. So on the 24th of November 1994, schoolgirl Gordana Kotevski had been late night shopping. She left the shopping centre at about 8 o'clock at night and began the walk home. It was only a short walk and it was just after 8 p.m. Witnesses who saw her noted that she seemed really jubilant. You know, she was kind of swinging her shopping bag, she was smiling. She got about 30 metres from her family home when two men in a white Toyota Hilux stopped and pulled her into the car. There was a struggle and witnesses heard her scream no and then a longer kind of wail of a no before she was pulled into the car and never seen again. The area where Gordana went missing was this area called Charlestown, which was completely safe. I mean, everyone knew each other, people rarely locked their doors, and for a young girl to be kidnapped off the street when there were plenty of witnesses around was incredibly shocking. And her aunt and uncle, they heard the screams. In fact, her aunt became so distressed by the sound of the woman's screams that she got her husband to go out and check what the commotion was.
Very loud female screams. I said to my husband, Gary, there's someone out there hurt or something. You know, go out and see. And as we were coming out, that's when the car drove off.
Obviously, you can only imagine how that image has haunted them for years since, knowing that she was never again seen alive. Police begin questioning everyone who knows Gordana about who could have possibly wanted to do this to her. The only thing that really crops up when they start talking to her friends and family is that there's been this guy who has been hanging around over the recent kind of weeks and months, and it's been kind of unsettling Gordana. In fact, it's been unsettling her to such a point that she's given him a nickname. She calls him the Spook. So the Spook is a man who's described as being in his 20s, and he's a guy that just starts kind of popping up at her workplace or the places she hangs out with her friends at the shopping centre. He obviously takes some kind of romantic interest in Gordana, which is not reciprocated, but it gets to the point where it really unnerves her. The family had also started receiving these very odd phone calls in the months before Gordana disappeared. They would be from a male caller who would ask to speak to her and would ask kind of odd questions like what size her swimwear was, what size her bra was, and he would purport to be calling from a shop called Gumleaf. When the family looked up the shop, it didn't exist. She used to work at the local Pizza Hut and she'd often look up from the counter and just find him standing there. She changes jobs, and when she moves to a new job, he starts hanging around her new place of employment too. Her best friend Belinda told me about one instance where the two girls were shopping in Just Jeans and Gordana was in a cubicle. She was trying on a skirt, and when she walked out of the cubicle to show Belinda the skirt and see what she thought, the Spook, as he's known, steps out of the adjoining cubicle. He looks Gordana up and down and says, "That looks nice." The Spook was described as being a man in his 20s of Middle Eastern appearance. He was often seen with a mate who was blonde and looked like a surfie. It wasn't till years later at inquest that it was put together that witnesses had seen two men by the same appearance abduct her. So eventually, despite the community searches and the police investigation, the case goes cold. It's not until years later, when I begin looking at the case, that it's pointed out to me there is a striking similarity between Gordana's case and the case of several other young women from the Newcastle region. And in fact, their cases may be the work of a serial killer.